Is past President Bob Davis here? He told me he was coming. Anyone see him? Ah, okay. Thank you. Well, welcome to the Rotary Club of York. We are a people of action committed to serving to change lives and honoring the four-way test. If you haven't already done so, kindly silence your cell phone. Leanne Wilson will lead us in our opening song, The Star-Spangled Banner, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Michael Reichman will offer the invocation, and Courtney Bailey will introduce our visitors.
Rotarians and guests, please join me in singing the Star-Spangled Banner. Oh, wrong song. I am sorry. I had it all prepped. And you know I love my music, singing along with you. There we go. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, spread stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night the flag was there. Oh, say that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rotarians, in honor of today's program, there are a lot of passages in both the Old and New Testament on beer, and it was very hard for me to find the most appropriate one. But I think, Glenn Miller might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. It might be like Corinthians chapter 25, verse 2. There's a tear in my beer because I'm trying for you, dear. Into these last 9 beers, I have shed 1,000,000 tears. I'm going to keep drinking until I'm petrified, and then maybe these tears will leave my eyes. There's a tear in my beer because I'm crying for you, dear. Lord, I've tried and I've tried, but my tears I can't hide. All these blues that I found have really got me down. I'm gonna keep drinking till I can't even think, because in the last week, I ain't asleep a wink. There's a tear in my beer because I'm crying for you, dear. For this, we give thanks and praise. Amen. Thank you, Hank Williams, Jr.
All righty. I am pleased to have the honor of introducing our guests for today's meeting. When I call your name, please stand and remain standing until President Jackie has welcomed you. Our first several guests are all from youth leadership: Claire Hartinger, Stephen Yo, Nancy Hartinger, Chris Hartinger, Wen Yo, Xinghing Hu, James Britton, Suzanne Pernatus. And the following is the guest of the club, Krista Moyer. We have Linda Grove, guest of Leanne Wilson, Craig Ashway, guest of Debbie Ashway, Elaine Banu, guest of Jules Tolbert, Hannah Murray, guest of Rob Bowen, Alan Wonder, guest of past President Gordon Fryrick, Ethan Weidman, guest of Mike Winiger.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We're really honored that you took the time away from your busy schedules to join us. We hope that you find the program to be fruitful and thirst quenching and enjoyable, and that you'll plan to join us again often. Rotarians, please help me welcome our visitors. I was prepared, you can have a seat, thank you. I was prepared to give great greetings to past President Bob Davis, who has been recovering from major surgery recently, and he was excited to be with us today. So I'm sorry to hear he's not having a good day, but hopefully he'll be able to join us next week. So keep him lifted in your prayers, if you will. Many of you know the very sad news about Rotarian Keith Smith, who died on Sunday after his battle with COVID-19 since November. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family and loved ones at this very difficult, sad, and tragic time. I'd like to ask you to join me for a moment of silence in remembrance of Keith. You may have enjoyed the slide presentation as you were eating your lunch today. I hope you did. They are compliments of Ken Cooper, who just returned from his trip to Florida, where he was visiting his son's family. And he had the opportunity to go to a Rotary event. They do a light the night event at a local park and lake. And so hopefully you saw those great pictures that the Rotary Club shared of this great event that they do every holiday season. And Ken has this great idea that, gee, maybe this is something we might want to do in the future surrounding Kiwanis Lake. Who knows? So anyway, thank you, Ken, for sharing those great photos with us. Don't forget that donations made to the Rotary Foundation by the end of December will be matched for points earned up to 1,000. This is a great way to quickly earn your Paul Harris Fellow or move up to your next Paul Harris Fellow level. You can send your contribution by check to the Rotary office, or you can also pay by credit card on our website. Thank you to everyone who has volunteered to assist with preparing for our Rotary office move in January. And anyone who's still interested in helping, I know Lynn would appreciate that. You can reach out to her to set up a time and date that works for you. Just a reminder that next week, we will have our last meeting of the year. There will be no meeting on December 29th. And now for our member moment. Christian Fitzpatrick was a member of the Westminster Rotary Club before moving to York and joining our club in 2018. He likes Rotary because of its direction, and he values the opportunity to serve. He's also made some great friends in the club. Christian is a member of the Preserve Planet Earth Committee, which fits him perfectly as he is an arborist and manager for Bartlett Tree Experts. He loves working outside, where he regularly sees tangible results. He oversees the York operation as well as a satellite area in Harrisburg and Lancaster. He says leading is like a puzzle. You have to find the right people, train them, and watch them develop as professionals. Christian joined the Maryland National Guard as a military policeman in 2000. Initially, he was assigned to stand guard on the roof of the Pentagon from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. for an entire year. But most of his active duty was served in Afghanistan and other countries in the Middle East, where he often ran security for convoys traveling to and from the Air Force Base. Christian likes adventure and thrill seeking, which could have been inspired by an experience he had when his Humvee got stuck in a minefield in Uzbekistan in the middle of the night as it teetered on a steep hill. He and another soldier ran back to base camp to get a larger vehicle to pull the Humvee out while not blowing up anything or anyone. Thankfully, all 6 of the soldiers on the detail got back to camp safely. He remains very close to one of his best friends from the military who lives in Maryland. There seem to be a number of thrill seekers in this club, as like other Rotarians we've learned about, Christian decided to try skydiving on a whim while vacationing at the beach and enjoyed the experience so much, he hopes to eventually jump solo. So it was no surprise to learn that Christian's favorite holiday movie is Die Hard. Christian has 2 children, 11-year-old Chase and 5-year-old Olivia, and likes introducing them to new experiences. He's always had pets, currently 2 cats, and he's training his new addition, a very smart 12-week-old border doodle. He's a Southern York County resident, and while he moved to the area because of his job, he loves York and plans to live here for a very long time. Christian was instrumental in helping to lead the planting for our joint community project, Choose for the Trail, and is an asset to the PPE committee. Thank you, Christian, for your enthusiasm, energy, and commitment to service above self. We are going to present another check from the proceeds from our Love for Community Fall event. Many of you may remember a program that was offered several months ago by Brant Kinsley, the CEO and founder of Pedal for Peace. And it was decided then that we really wanted to support them in some way, and perhaps our fall fundraiser proceeds was a way to do that. Brant couldn't be with us today. He's playing it safe. He was exposed to someone who tested positive for COVID-19, but he sent a great ambassador, his fiance, Krista Moyer, who will receive the check on Brant's behalf.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. I'll apologize in advance. Brant is the talker. He is the face. He is normally the one that you guys all see. I'm just the girl behind the scenes keeping everything running smoothly. So he's a much better speaker than I am, but we genuinely appreciate all of your help. Pedal for Peace is our baby. We are going into our 5th year. September 2022 will be our 5-year anniversary. And we do it for the kids. We really do. This year was our biggest year ever. We had 2 mountain bike teams, a junior high and a high school mountain bike team, and we had a BMX team. We were operating 7 days a week. We were traveling every weekend for mountain bike races. And then on Sundays, I'm taking the BMX kids and putting them in my vehicle. We're driving back to get back to the BMX racetrack so the BMX team can race. And without help and sponsors from people like you guys in this room, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So we genuinely appreciate it. And thank you guys so very much.
Krista, it was our pleasure to present the check for $3,000 to Pedal for Peace. And we ask that you extend our congratulations to Brant and wish him all the best and continued success with this incredibly important program. And now past President Lou Elliker has some Students of the Month to present.
Says, please repeat the question. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you 2 impressive juniors from York Suburban High School who have distinguished themselves in many ways. Pardon for the voice. Claire Hardinger, sorry. Claire is the daughter of Chris and Nancy Hardinger, who are both present with us today. Claire's school activities include Hope Squad, Link Crew, Minithon, Puzzle Partners, The Silence Ends Here, YSCF Impact Foundation, National Honor Society, National English Honor Society, Science National Honor Society, and varsity tennis. She enjoys playing tennis, baking, listening to music, and volunteering in the community. Claire has received the Girl Scouts Bronze and Silver Awards, the Exceptional Honors Award, the World Languages Award. She's on the Distinguished Honor Roll in the top 5% of her class. Claire plans to attend college to earn a master's degree in physician assistant studies, and from there, working in oncology. Stephen Yao. Stephen is the son of Weijun Yao and Chinning Hu, who are both present with us today. Being monolingual, I probably butchered those names, but Stephen's school activities include concert band, jazz band, science Olympiad, and swimming manager. He enjoys drawing, playing the piano, soccer, and weightlifting. Stephen has received the Scholastic Art and Writing Gold Key for drawing. He is on the Distinguished Honor Roll and in the top 5% of his class. Stephen plans to go into the medical field. Accompanying the students today, in addition to their parents, are York Suburban High School counselors, Suzanne Pernatus and Jamie Britton. And I see Dr. Tim Williams, Rotarian, superintendent of Suburban School, sitting with them too. We're going to ask Claire to go first.
Good afternoon. Before I begin, I'd like to say thank you for naming me Student of the Month. It's an amazing opportunity that I'll truly never take for granted. I'm extremely involved in my school and community activities. I've also grown very passionate about educating others about mental health awareness through two of the most impactful organizations that I'm a part of, Hope Squad and The Silence Ends Here. The YSH's chapter of Hope Squad is in its inaugural year of activity. It's also the first chapter to be established in Pennsylvania. I, alongside other members, was selected by fellow students to reduce youth suicide through education, training, and peer intervention. Additionally, I'm the YS Student Ambassador for the York County Youth Mental Health Association's The Silence Ends Here, a student-led organization that dedicates its time to spreading mental health awareness around York. Though my involvement in these organizations has just begun, I've always loved helping others through their struggles and ending the stigma surrounding mental health. How have I helped break the stigma around mental health, you may ask? Let me show you. To begin, I struggle with anxiety and depression. My anxiety causes me to break down to nervous chills before anything involving large groups, such as today. And my depression takes over before anything, socially or academically. However, my daily struggles are not what caused me to be such an advocate for mental health, rather my freshman year experience. During 9th grade, my mental health hit rock bottom. There was a night specific where I had an extreme panic attack in front of my parents. It was a night where I couldn't move a single muscle in my body and found myself trying to breathe with the assistance of a brown paper bag. I saw tears rush down my mom's face as I spoke the unthinkable to her. Luckily, I had an amazing support system and I found myself the appropriate help. Now, y'all may be wondering why I brought up this occurrence, and it's quite simple. Despite being in Hope Squad and The Silence Ends Here for a short time, I've always loved helping others, and I've been able to learn what true empowerment and empathy are. In fact, having the confidence to speak openly about my mental health has grown exponentially since I've joined Hope Squad. Recently, I found a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. that resonates with me. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. I advocate for those who are afraid to speak up because I do not want another life lost due to the pin-dropping silence surrounding society's mental health. I hope that by breaking the silence today, I spark a conversation among your friends, family, and fellow Rotarians. Again, I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to speak here today and for welcoming my family as well.
Good afternoon. As you know, my name is Stephen Yao. I'm a junior at York Suburban High School. I'm very honored and grateful for this opportunity to stand and speak here today. I want to start off by saying that I hate doing the dishes. There's just something about them that feels like I'm expending too much effort for too little output. I have to set whatever I was doing aside, roll up my sleeves, and touch wet food just so my mom can take a look at an empty sink and not hate my guts. I used to leave them in the sink almost all day, and they ended up being harder to wash if I just done them straight away. I knew this, and yet I did it every time regardless. Maybe I lack common sense, but mostly it was that I lacked discipline. I always held lofty goals, but I could never ground myself to commit to a structured plan on how to achieve them. I've always struggled with procrastination, and it's a problem that I've tried tackling over and over again. So I decided one night while eating dinner that I would wash the dishes right after I was done eating. It's a simple and menial task, but to me, it's also tedious and can be easily procrastinated. However, as I slowly settled into this routine of washing the dishes right after eating, I found that it was always less messy and took up less time than I had initially perceived. Eventually, this became a habit along with other small, menial, but necessary tasks like making the bed, taking out the trash, or doing the laundry. I learned that by doing these things immediately when they presented themselves, I could concentrate on work and put myself in the right mindset more quickly, and as a result, carry out my responsibilities more efficiently. This expanded into things like homework, projects, and long-term goals, with which I learned that if I just started, the rest of the work usually falls into place, along with all the problems, planning, and the actual execution that come with such work. Because I perceived responsibilities like washing the dishes negatively, chores used to take me hours to finish because of procrastination. I now truly understand that while procrastination feels extremely rewarding in the present, it sabotages one's future with problems that never should have existed in the first place. Thank you.
Well, Claire, thank you so much for your courage and for your willingness to share your very personal story with us. You are an inspiration. We encourage you to share it often with many because I think it is a great service. And we know your future is incredibly bright. So all the best to you as you continue your education. And Stephen, thank you for that great lesson. I think it's one that we can all take a note from and apply. And I think it's a tremendous life lesson that you've shared. And certainly it's a sign of great things to come for you and how you view life and how you tackle things. So all the best to you too, as well. I know you also have a very, very bright future. Thank you for being here. I know Dr. Williams is very, very proud of you, as are all your administrators and your families, your parents. So thank you all. And again, please help me congratulate our students of the month. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jeff Vermeulen, who will introduce our program.
Thank you, President Jackie. Rotarians, our speaker today is Glenn Smith, who is going to offer us all a crash course on the history of craft beer with a York County perspective. Having known Glenn for a number of years, I can tell you he is eminently qualified to present on the topic of beer. The guy really loves to drink. I mean, it's just a fact. But I have to tell you, there's more to this process than just drinking it. And I can tell you that Glenn has put his 10,000 hours in on the topic of beer to become an expert. He has spent literally the last 20 years traveling our great country, visiting small independent craft breweries, listening to the brewer stories, learning from each of them about their craft, sampling their wares, and gaining a high level of understanding of the variety and uniqueness of the craft beer industry. So in 2017, he made the decision to take his knowledge about brewing to launch Brewery Tours LLC, which was initially conceived of as the York County Ale Trail. Brewery Tours offers exclusive, educational, and entertaining craft beer experiences led by fellow knowledgeable and experienced beer guides like Glenn. Like so many small businesses confronted with the pandemic, Glenn and his team had to pivot. And in 2020, in order to stay viable, they created the ultimate virtual craft beer experience, allowing his customers to experience craft beer, a tasting, and a tour literally from their own homes. It's great ingenuity, Glenn. In his day job, Glenn is an attorney, and for the past 20 years, he has served in both a public and a private capacity. Public, he had been our county solicitor for a number of years. He is currently in private practice here in York. And just recently, he has actually vertically integrated both of his businesses into a unified business model, specializing in DUI casework. That is a joke, please. He does do DUI casework, but not through his affiliation with York Ale Trail. Kidding. Rotarians, please join me in welcoming our speaker, Rotarian Glenn Smith.
All right, this is Jeff. Thanks so much. I did tell him it was okay to do the DUI joke, but oh well. All right, so I know I have a couple assistants that are going to be helping me out. If you guys can come on up here. All right, and let me set my timer. All right, so first of all, before I go ahead and get started, Steven, where are you at? Dude, I feel a connection with you already. Dishes, that's my job at the house, and man, yeah. All right. So gentlemen, what I'd like each of you to do is grab a bag or grab a cooler, and if you'd be so kind to place one of those cans on each table. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I guess to get it out of the way, happy holidays. Merry Beer Christmas. All right, so now that I got those puns out of the way, they say no good story. Oh, where am I at? I don't have my clicker working. There we go. Okay. Well, they say no good story ever starts with a salad. So might I suggest that the story of America actually starts with a beer? Because after all, it was good old Ben Franklin who supposedly told us God made beer because he loves us and wants us to be happy. So here we are with almost 9,000 craft breweries in America who produce over 23 million barrels of beer a year. You'd think we'd be pretty happy by now, right? Well, so much for that. By the way, 23 million barrels of beer, to put it into context, that equates to over 713 million gallons. That pours 5.7 billion pints, which equates to 17 pints of beer per American. And that includes all the women and children in this country as well. And that doesn't even account for the 157 million barrels of beer that is produced by big beer. Big beer, little beer, there's a lot of beer in America. All right, so I'm going to stop for a second. So as your cans are being distributed, I find it very difficult to talk about the topic without a beer in my hand. So each of you should have a tasting glass in front of you, and I welcome you to participate or not to participate. That is certainly your choice. You will have 3 selections in front of you. I encourage you to try all 3, try one, whatever the case is, because I'm a firm believer that there is a beer for everyone, and there's a time and place for every beer. Today may be that time. So we have 3 choices for you today from 3 York County breweries. The first one is from Collusion Tap Works, which is their panacea. It is a coffee milk stout with an ABV of 6.2. So who can tell me, what does ABV stand for? Alcohol by volume. Where's President Jackie? I was going to throw these things up until what happened the other week. So, all right, here, I'll have you hand out our prizes. That one's for Jeff. ABV's alcohol by volume. It's got an IBU of 38. What does IBU stand for? Jeff, you're no longer able to participate. Okay, Lauren got that. So there's one for Lauren. All right. So we also have a beer from Old Forge, which is their Hop Stash. It's an American IPA, which is 6.3 on the ABVs, 25 on the IBUs. And then we also have Big Truck, which is a Desert Cruiser. This one comes in at only 4%. This is a session beer. So for those that have something important to do for the rest of the afternoon, you might want to focus on that. Only 24 IBUs on that one as well. All right. So as you are opening your cans and sampling your beers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you guys something here that I like to call the perfect pour. And there's a reason for this. 2 reasons, in fact. First of all, to do the perfect pour, what that winds up doing is that is going to alleviate a lot of the gas that is in your can. I'd be happy to. All right. So as you well know, beer is carbonated, right? And if you drink beer out of a can or out of a bottle, in addition to the beer, you are consuming all that carbonation, which fills up your stomach with gas. We don't want gas. We want beer, right? And the second thing we do is as that carbonation is being released while I pour it, it is agitating the beer. It's as if you were stirring the beer up. And what that will do is that will increase not only the flavor, but the aroma of the beer and give you the best quality experience you can for that particular beer. So I suggest going forward, wherever you may be, at home or at out, don't drink out of a can, don't drink out of a bottle, drink it out of a glass, and we'll do it like so. We're going to tip our glass to a 45-degree angle. We're going to pour it down the side till we get about 3/4 of the way. We will straighten it up, and you should have a beer with a nice little head on it. I should say hi to everybody out there in Zoom land. We wish you were here. Okay, so this is going to be an educational experience. We're just not going to be sitting around drinking all afternoon because, yeah. So let me ask another question. How old is beer? How long has beer been around? Anyone? Any guesses? 5,000 years. You're pretty darn close. It's actually almost 4,000 years old. And the reason we know that is because, there we go. We found a clay tablet that had a recipe on it. And in fact, it wasn't just a recipe, it was a prayer. It was a hymn. And it was to the hymn of the goddess Ninkasi. And it dates back to 1800 BC in the Sumerian Empire in the Mesopotamian region. And this is the first appearance that we know of beer in the world. They were certainly brewing it prior to this, but this is the first physical evidence of beer in this world. So almost 4,000 years old. I would suggest the beer that they were brewing back then is not particularly something you'd like to try. It was a little lumpy, and that's never a good thing. But let me read one of the hymns from Ninkasi and show you just how important beer was back in ancient civilizations. Ninkasi, you are the one who pours out the filtered beer of the collector vat. It is like the onrush of the Tigris and Euphrates. That's pretty powerful stuff, right? All right. So interestingly enough, the people that were brewing beer back then happened to be her priestesses. And it also happened to be the women back at home that were brewing beer. In fact, historically, women were the brewers of this world. That was up until the American Revolution, which changed some dynamics. But up until then, women were those that were making beer. Okay, so we're going to fast forward a couple centuries. And I'm going to take you up to September 16th of 1620. The Mayflower just set sail with 102 passengers bound for Virginia because they were heading to the colony known as Jamestown. 2 months later, they're a bit off course, but there's a bigger problem. They were running out of beer. On board, yes, they had water, but over the length of a ship ride, 2 months at sea, that water really wasn't that drinkable anymore. So in fact, beer was the primary source of hydration on the ship. And it was probably the only thing on there that you could drink that probably wasn't going to kill you. So the ship captain and its crew knew that they were running low on supplies, and they had to get back to England after dropping the Pilgrims off. So they found them in a situation that they were looking for the closest place to drop these guys off and get home and still have some beer left. And well, they happened to find this rock up in Massachusetts, which we call Plymouth. And well, that's where the Pilgrims landed. So they didn't make it to Jamestown. It was all because they ran out of beer. So what did the Pilgrims do when they landed? Well, one of the first things they did is they built their own brewery. Okay, so the Pilgrims were not the first to brew in America. In fact, you can go back to the first colony, which was back in 1584, the Roanoke colony. And well, they had attempted to brew beer up until the point that they went missing. And then we fast forward a little bit to 1620, up in what we now know as New York. And that is where the Dutch colony, the West India Company, actually created the very first commercial brewery. So that's where commercial brewing really gets its first start here in America, which was 1613. Philadelphia had its first brewery in 1686, but they were all surpassed because brewing had in fact been around for a long time. Native Americans had been brewing beer here in America for well over 1,000 years before we ever showed up. However, they were doing it just a little bit different than the way that we know beer today. So, who can tell me what are the 4 main ingredients for beer? That good York water. Yes, sir. Oh, I apologize. It was the, hold on, I got to say this so I don't blow out the microphone. That good York water. Hops, that's right. Barley, okay. Barley, I'm going to simplify it and say grain, a starch-based grain. Yes, but today barley is, that's correct. And what's the 4th? Yeast, that's right. So you guys can come up and get your peppermint patties whenever you like, okay? Because I'm not going to throw these, right, President Jackie? All right, I'm scared after all that. Okay, so what was different back then is the Native Americans were actually brewing beer with corn. So corn is a viable source of starch, right? And what we really need out of that grain, whether it's barley, it's rice, it's wheat, or corn, is that starch. So they were able to make beer back then with those ingredients, with the exception it was predominantly corn. In fact, back in the early colonial area, most of the beer being made at that time was with corn because they initially had difficulty growing barley in our soil, in our climate. They were eventually able to overcome it, but originally it was all corn-based, which would have made a bit of a sweeter type of beer. All right, so as I take my sip. All right, so as the colonies started to expand and they started moving off of the coastline, some of the things that they started to focus on was as they were building these new towns and as they were building these new settlements, they had to attract people to them, get them away from the ocean, which was a more dangerous journey out there. So what they did is one of the first things was they created taverns and breweries. A little bit of a carrot, come out and see us. We've got beer. As I mentioned earlier, women were predominantly the source of beer. They were the ones that owned and operated the breweries, as well as many of the taverns. So women were a crucial part of this, just not from a brewing point, but also from an economic standpoint. They were equal contributors to the business community. All right, so we're going to go ahead and fast forward a little bit further into this. So we're going to go to 1810. All right, a mere 34 years after the founding of our country, our nation's first brewing census occurred at that time, and they counted only 132 breweries in our country. 48 of them, the most, were here in Pennsylvania. So once again, Pennsylvania leading the way. One of those breweries included the Barnett's Brewery. Now, I will say the picture of the brewery up there, although it is a Barnett's Brewery, we could not locate their York brewery. This is actually the brewery that they opened up in Baltimore. So when Barnett's came to America, he came from Bavaria, good brewing town, right? And he decided he was going to open up 2 breweries. He opened up one here in York, and he opened up one in Hanover. And then after opening those breweries and starting them, him and his son went down to Baltimore and opened up this particular brewery. And this was the very first brewery in Baltimore. And this began a bit of a trend because up to this point, the majority of the settlers in this country were from where? They were from England, right? So they were from England, Ireland, Wales, things of that nature. And the predominant beers they drank in Great Britain, in the British Empire, were ales, much like the IPA and the stout that you have on your tables. German settlers started to arrive in this country, such as Barnett's, and they brewed lagers, which was the predominant beer that you would have gotten in Germany and Czechoslovakia and Austria and Belgium, those particular areas, much like the lager beer that you have from Big Truck on your table. So we gave you 2 examples of the different styles of beer. So Barnett's opens up his brewery here in York on South Beaver Street around 1733. Before the founding of this particular county. Having immigrated here in 1732 at the age of 55. He wound up living down by the Codorus, and as I mentioned, he wound up moving down to Baltimore, but he left behind him a lot of kids. In fact, 10 of those children went on to become brewers themselves. So York County in the Hanover area had a bar nitz brewer active in their breweries well into the 1860s. So in addition to the bar nitz brewing, well, we got a couple other things that were going on at that time, because the number of breweries in our country had now, 50 years later, started to expand. We originally had 132, as I mentioned, back in 1810. 50 years later, we're up to 1,269 breweries. They're starting to build. And that included a particular upstart in St. Louis who was a soap and candle maker who decided he was going to make beer. You may have heard the last name. It's Anheuser. He decided that he was going to pair up with his son-in-law, whose last name happened to be, Busch. That's right. Thus, Anheuser-Busch was created in approximately 1860. And together they established Budweiser as the first national beer. And they were able to ship it coast to coast because of this brand new process called pasteurization in refrigerated cars. So meanwhile, as this was happening back here in York, well, we happen to have a few more breweries of our own pop up. First being the Kurt's Nest and Son Brewery. And this is interesting to me because William H. Kurt, who is the picture on the left-hand side here, he just wasn't making beer. He had his own malt farms and his casting forges, and he also created turbine water wheels. So this guy was doing a lot of stuff. And if you can see, it's a little hard to see from where you are, I suspect, but we have a map on the side over here that shows where it was. And where his brewery was right next to the Godoras because, of course, York County has great water, right? Exactly. JT's nodding his head in the back. All right, good. All right, so they opened up their brewery in 1850 on what was then called North Water Street. We now know that is North Pershing. And as I mentioned, it was directly across from the Godoras to use that good York County water. A couple years later, another brewery opens up, which is the 8 Pfeiffer Brewery. And this one it kind of starts a trend here in York. So Abraham Pfeiffer, who happens to be another German from Bavaria, comes to York. We're starting to get a lot of German Bavarians coming to York. He had immigrated to Baltimore and moved to York in 1854, opened up this brewery on the corner of King and Queen on the northwest side, which for those of you who are looking for an image in your head, that happens to be the parking lot across from what is now known as the Bond Building. Okay, so we have a brewery in downtown York located on the corners of King and Queen. However, he decided he was going to move his brewery when the Civil War broke out and went to a little safer pastures over in Spring Garden. And if you have an opportunity, the map shows the exact location of where that brewery was, which is located right next to Tyler Run to take advantage of that good York County water. Let's see a bit of a trend happening here. So before he left, he wound up selling his brewery to another gentleman. But before he did that, I'll back up. So he wound up selling it to another fellow by the name of Eichelberger. Eichelberger opened up his own brewery, which was the Eichelberger and Brothers Brewery on the exact same location on King and Queen. So we now have our second brewery on the exact same site of the first one. And then after that, Kurtz and Ness bought that brewery and took that brewery over as well. So we're starting to see breweries pop up and they're consolidating and expanding and new ones are coming up. We have an honorable mention. Oh, should I forget to mention advertising? Advertising for beer is rather important, right? Most times you'll see an ad in the newspaper about how good our beer is. Well, A. Pfeiffer Brewing decided they wanted to do it a little bit different. Much like today, they did samplings, free beer samplings to try to hook you and get you to enjoy their beer. And for those of you that can't read it, this is a good one. So this is right out of the York Daily Record from May 18th of 1878. And it's a pig's feet and sauerkraut lunch. Can we get that one for next week? No? Okay. All right. Every respectable man in York is invited tonight to a free lunch of sauerkraut and pig's feet Also, Pfeiffer's beer, brewed from pure spring water on tap. This beer is equal to Free's well-known York beer or Bersner and Engel's celebrated Philadelphia beer. Persons can feel assured. They can feel assured after drinking Pfeiffer's beer, they will not get up with a headache the next morning. That's fantastic. I'll buy a 6-pack of that any day. All right. So we'll skip over that one. I'll give an honorable mention to August Webble Brewery, which had another brewery that opened up in 1860 in downtown York, which happens to be on the location of where Fulton Bank is located. They had a very nice beer garden. If you can see that picture from here back in 1870, it was, I don't think they did mowing grass back then, but nevertheless, they had this out of town. So you can go out in the countryside and enjoy their beers. So at this time, with the exception of Anheuser-Busch, breweries were still small scale and local. However, in the decades that followed the Civil War, we started witnessing an industrial revolution, right? So we saw all of this technology that came out of the Civil War, and we began to use it in an industrial sense. And that included the beer industry, because they started doing mass production and mass consumption in beer, particularly thanks to immigration. Beer and immigration are tied very closely together in the history of this country. So we wound up seeing a lot of immigrants from England, Ireland, and Germany, and that directly impacted the types of beer that we had produced in this country. In addition, with the advent of pasteurization and artificial refrigeration that extended the beer's shelf life, we started seeing many more breweries pop up in this country. All right. So as the breweries are starting to grow, post-Civil War, by 1873, there were 4,131 breweries in this country. Think about that. We don't have the population we have today, and there were over 4,000 breweries in our country post-Civil War. We didn't eclipse that number again for another 132 years. So all of these breweries out there, the brew scene started exploding here in York County as well. Andrew Schleiger's brewery opened up in 1863. He happened to be a partner with Pfeiffer and decided to go out on his own. And then one of the big two for York County, for those of you who know your history, was the Helbs. So Mr. Helb came again from Germany, moved to Shrewsbury, opened up a tannery. Next to the tannery, he decided he was going to open up his own brewery. So started a new brewery down in Shrewsbury called Helbs Brewing Company. Has a son, Theodore. Theodore starts to work for him as a foreman, decides he likes brewing, goes down to Baltimore, gets his apprenticeship completed, comes back to York County, and then both him and his father, well, they wind up purchasing Schleiger's Brewery. Interestingly enough, their brother, Julius Helbs, starts a bottling and retail company over in Hanover. And why is that? Because according to the laws, a brewer could only brew beer. They could not sell it, nor could they bottle it. So they wound up going integrated and having the brother create his own bottling and retail over in Hanover, which stood there for many years, bottling and selling quite a lot of different breweries. So we're going to fast forward a little bit here and look up in the upper right-hand corner of this particular slide, and also in the middle as well, because we had a small brewery, which wasn't producing a significant amount of beer. And then Helbs decided he was going to take it up a notch. And well, he wanted to expand his brewery, expand operations, and created a 5-story brick brewery. Again, where? On the corner of of King and Queen. So this is our 3rd brewery that is on the exact same site. And this had to have been a building to see, because not only was it a 5-story brick building, it had steel and stone that was topped with an ornate copper roof, as well as an elevator that went to the penthouse. That would have been worth a brewery tour. Okay, so we're going to have an honorable mention, the John Free Brewery. I could find absolutely nothing on this other than apparently Pfeiffer really liked it because he mentioned it in his previous advertisement. Okay, So in 1894, the other big brewery that many of you have probably heard of is Carl Katz. Carl Katz wound up creating York Brewing Company. In fact, he didn't really create it. It had actually been in operation for a year prior, and he bought it from the two individuals that had started it. But he was so impressed with what Helb did is he decided he was going to build a model very similar to what the Helbs had done, with one exception. He changed his model. He was impressed that Helb over the last 20 years had slowly built up its client base to the extent that they were a national distributor of their beer. To this day, the only national beer distributor coming out of York County. So what did Katz do? Well, he did a little bit more of a direct approach, because over the next 3 years after buying that brewery, he wound up building a whole, or excuse me, not building, but buying a whole bunch of saloons and taverns who bought his beer and then sold their beer out. So he created his own streamline. So fortunately, everybody really liked his beer. So he decided he was going to build a bigger brewery, which is the picture of the brewery that we have on the left-hand side. Again, another 5-story building, most likely because he really was impressed with what Helb had done and created a very similar looking structure that was here in York. Unfortunately, both of these buildings are no longer with us. This one was located let me take a look at that, Lauren. I'm not 100% sure. Okay, so by this point in time, well, we'll skip over that because I can't read it. All right, so as we know, things were all about to come to a crashing halt, right? Because Prohibition came. So at this point in time, we had about 1,500 breweries here in the country, and the 21st Amendment was adopted. Excuse me, the 18th Amendment was adopted, and everything came to a crashing halt, with some exceptions. There were certain breweries that actually were able to get licenses from the federal government to allow them to continue to brew beer for medicinal purposes. I kind of envisioned something very similar to when medical marijuana showed up, that everybody went to their doctors and said, hey, doc, can you help me out? So yeah, they were actually folks like Anheuser-Busch and Pabst and Schlitz. Those were the breweries that were able to get these licenses from the federal government and continue to brew their normal beer, which obviously was a huge advantage, because the majority of the breweries were no longer able to produce beer. Anything short of a 0.5% of alcohol was no longer permitted. You were able to make near beer, but, well, I probably don't have to tell you, nobody really bought near beer. Okay, so we fast forward, hooray, 21st Amendment happens in 1933, but that's a long time not to be doing anything, right? So we went from 1,500 breweries to 756 over that period of time. Many were able to survive either as a canning or bottling type of company. The few that were able to still brew beer, or they found other sorts of things that they could do in order to keep their doors open. Of the York County breweries, Helbs and York survived. They were still here and immediately reopened their doors in 1933. But by the time that the 21st Amendment had already been adopted, companies like Schlitz and Pabst and Anheuser-Busch, well, they were smart, because during that time frame, what they wound up doing is they wound up buying trucking fleets, canning and bottling lines, and other assets, because they knew at some point Prohibition was going to end, and they positioned themselves for the back end of that, because everything changed post-Prohibition. Pre-Prohibition, over 85% of beer was purchased from the tavern or saloon, meaning it was a draft beer. That was all going to change post-Prohibition. It was going cans and it was going bottles. And who owned them? What we now call big beer. So smaller breweries like Helbs and York Brewing, although they managed to survive, the national breweries expanded their investments. And World War II shows up, which saw a big kick in beer because people were drinking during World War II, but we didn't see the expansion of breweries. And this is really where the decline in craft beer in this country happens, because post-World War II, come 1980, We went from 1933 with 756 breweries to 1980, where we had 101 breweries. And then in the subsequent time, in 1984, we were actually down to 74 breweries in this country, in the entire country. And of those breweries, there were 3 that owned 80% of the market share. 3 breweries owned 80% of the market share. And you all know the names: Anheuser, Miller, and Coors. Okay. So, good president, bad president? Yeah. Well, for craft beer, he's a good president. We like him for that, because something happened during his time in the White House, and he passed legislation that actually allowed home brewing. Because one of the things we didn't mention here is, following Prohibition, you were still not allowed to brew at home. It was illegal. It was one of the remnants left over from the 18th Amendment that they never got rid of. So Jimmy Carter passed legislation back in 1978 that allowed people to start home brewing. So certain brewers, like, for example, Samuel Adams and Sierra Nevada, those 2 particular brewers on opposite sides of the coasts, they started brewing at home, and they eventually started opening up their own breweries, and we started to see smaller breweries start to come back. And then one other thing that happened as well, thanks to the federal government, they actually had a hop institute over in the West Coast to create new types of hops. And one of those hops is in 2 of the beers that you have here today, and that is the Cascade hops. It's an American hop, which is very floral, is very fruity, and up to that time, brewers predominantly used what are referred to as noble hops. Okay, I'm getting close? Okay. I could talk about this all day long. All right. Which totally changed the whole entire flavor of beer. All right. So that's what it looks like. Starting from 1984 all the way up to 2021, that's one hell of an industry, right? You can't compare that to anything else that's out there. So by today, right now, we are quickly approaching 9,000 breweries in this country. So what does that mean for you and me? Well, here in Pennsylvania alone, that's $82 billion for the US economy, generated just from Pennsylvania, and more than 580,000 jobs. Pennsylvania alone ranks 5th in the country for the number of breweries, craft breweries, 2nd for economic production at 6.3 million, and 2nd for the number of barrels produced. We fight back and forth as number 1 and number 2 year to year. So where are we for York County? And I'll leave this as my final question. How many breweries are there in York County today? 23? Anybody? 150. Oh my God, that would be crazy, right? Well, we got 26, so pretty darn close, okay? We have 26 breweries and growing. We expect to have at least another 3 breweries opened up by this coming summer. So York County is a really special county in this state when it comes to craft beer, Pennsylvania being an outstanding craft beer leader as well. So that's our presentation. If you won your York Peppermint Patty, come up and get it for us later. And enjoy your beer. Cheers. Absolutely. Take my beer.
Have you ever met someone who brewed their own beer? What everybody I've ever met, or people who have breweries, brew pubs, they're really, really passionate about their craft, about what they're doing. And Glenn is obviously incredibly knowledgeable and very interested in this industry. And we thank you for sharing a good bit of that knowledge with us today. And we look forward to meeting some of these brewers, is that what they're called, as we travel around York County. Thank you for what you're doing to bring that to the forefront. So Glenn has graciously signed the book for the book Dig by A.S. King, which we'll present to York Suburban. And next week will be our holiday program featuring a seasonal musical performance from the Susquehannock High School Jazz Ensemble. It's a 19-piece band in the style of swing era and includes a vocalist and performs a variety of music going back from 1935 to today, from Glenn Miller to Ella Fitzgerald to Mariah Carey. Please remember to register any guests that you're bringing by Tuesday, the 21st. And again, a reminder, next week will be our last meeting of the year. In closing, our quote today is by Venus Williams. You have to believe in yourself when no one else does. That makes you a winner right there. Rotarians, have a great rest of your week. This meeting is adjourned.